in a quiet, old neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, where brick houses stood shoulder to shoulder, and every window offered a glimpse into centuries of history, Elizabeth Smith lived alone in her ancestral home. She was in her 80s, her hair silver, her face etched with the lines of age, yet her eyes still held a sharp intensity that spoke of an indomitable will. Though her body was frail, her mind was alert, and her store of memories boundless. It was in this house that her childhood, adolescence, and golden youth had unfolded. Every corner held the memories of her loved ones. Every piece of furniture bore the touch of the past. When the soft morning light streamed through her old living room window, dust motes seemed to dance in the air, and Elizabeth would reflect on her bygone days in that light. Her only sustenance was a small pension and the house, steeped in the memories of her ancestors, which was priceless to her. This house was not merely a structure. It was a part of her being, her roots, her identity. Elizabeth sat in her favorite armchair, an old book in her hand. Through her spectacles, she occasionally glanced out the window, where the bustling life of Brooklyn flowed at its own rhythm. She sighed deeply. She remembered, Brooklyn. My dear Brooklyn. If these walls could speak, what stories they would tell. My parents, my husband, my child. Everyone's memories are intertwined with every brick here. But now it's just me and these silent walls. David and Sarah, have they truly forgotten their mother? Or do they only value this house? Her only son, David, and his wife, Sarah, lived in a luxurious suburb of New Jersey. Their lives were touched by modernity, where towering glass skyscrapers reached for the sky, and every day was filled with new purchases and social events. David would call occasionally, but those calls contained more urgency about selling the ancestral property than love or concern for his mother. There was a coldness in his voice that did not touch Elizabeth's heart. Sarah echoed David's sentiments. Beneath her sweet words lay a deep selfishness. She would say, "It's very important to sell this house for our child's good future, Mom." Their child, little James, whom Elizabeth rarely saw, had his name used as an excuse to fund their lavish lifestyle. Elizabeth knew that their child's future was merely a pretext. The real purpose was to finance their own extravagant living, buying new cars, and dining at expensive restaurants. She would sigh, but she lacked the strength to protest. She knew that if she sold this house, her last refuge would be gone. Her husband's face, who had built this house brick by brick, would flash before her eyes. How could she sell her husband's memory? This question constantly gnawed at her. One day, David and Sarah were sitting in their luxurious living room, sipping wine. Sarah asked David, "David, have you called Mom again? What did she say? Has she agreed to sell the house?" David replied irritably, "No, Sarah." The old woman is still clinging to her old memories. She doesn't understand how much easier our lives would be if we sold this house. James's school fees, the down payment for our new car, all our problems would be solved. Sarah sighed and said, "I know. But you know how stubborn Mom is. It's not easy to convince her. We need to think of something else. If this house isn't sold, our dreams will remain unfulfilled." David said with a worried look, "I know. But what can I do? I can't force her to sell. There will be legal trouble." Sarah, with a smile, placed her hand on David's shoulder and said, "Why force her? We'll convince her. We'll show her that we want what's best for her. We'll bring her to us." Then slowly, she winked. David asked, "What are you trying to say?" Sarah confidently replied, "We'll convince her that it's not safe for her to live alone in Brooklyn. We'll tell her that we'll take care of her. Once she's with us, the rest will be easy." David said with a worried look, "But what if she doesn't agree?" Sarah confidently replied, "She will agree. We have to make her agree. It's very important for our future." Elizabeth spent her days in old Brooklyn bookstores, where she would spend hours poring over the pages of old novels. She would walk in the local park, where children played and old people sat on benches, chatting. Her neighbor Martha, a kind and empathetic woman, was her only friend. Martha would knock on Elizabeth's door every morning, inquire about her well-being, and sometimes bring her hot coffee. Talking to Martha, Elizabeth could forget her loneliness, if only for a while. Martha knew David and Sarah's true intentions, but she couldn't tell Elizabeth directly. She just stayed by her side, offering emotional support. Martha's presence brought a sigh of relief into Elizabeth's life. One afternoon, Martha was sitting in Elizabeth's kitchen, drinking coffee. She asked, "Elizabeth, how are you? Have David and Sarah talked to you about selling the house again?" Elizabeth sighed and replied, "Yes, Martha. The same thing every day. They don't understand that this house is not just a house to me. It's my life. All my memories are tied up here." Martha said, "I know, Elizabeth. But you're alone. Your health isn't good either. You have to think about what they're saying." Elizabeth looked at Martha and said, "Are you joining their side too, Martha? Do you also want me to sell my house?" Martha held Elizabeth's hand and said, "No, Elizabeth. I just want what's best for you. I want you to be healthy, to be well. If David and Sarah want to take care of you, you should give them a chance." Elizabeth shook her head and said, "I don't know, Martha. My heart tells me something is wrong. I see nothing but greed in their eyes." Martha said with a worried look, "If you feel something is wrong, tell me. I'm here for you." One cold winter morning, when the streets of Brooklyn were covered in snow and the biting wind chilled to the bone, Elizabeth suddenly fell gravely ill. Her body was so weak that she couldn't get out of bed. She struggled to breathe, and her entire body ached. She somehow managed to grab her phone and call David. Her hand trembled, and her voice was faint. She said in a weak voice, "David, I'm very sick. I think I need to see a doctor." David replied irritably, "What's wrong, Mom? What's the problem now?" "I'm very busy." Elizabeth, trembling, said, "I don't know. I feel very unwell. Can you come?" David hesitated for a moment and said, "Okay, Mom, we're coming. But it's not right for you to be alone." Upon hearing the news, David and Sarah came to Brooklyn. There was no sign of concern on their faces, but rather a suppressed joy. They offered to take Elizabeth to their modern apartment in New Jersey, saying that she would be well cared for there and would recover quickly. David said, "Mom, it's not safe for you to be alone in Brooklyn. You'll be well cared for if you stay with us in New Jersey." Sarah echoed him, "Yes, Mom. We'll find you a good doctor and you'll recover quickly." Elizabeth, placing her last hope in her son, agreed to their proposal. She thought that perhaps in her old age, she would find a little love and refuge with her son. She didn't want to leave her beloved home, but her ailing body forced her. She didn't know what a terrible future awaited her. An unknown fear gnawed at her, but she couldn't express it. Her tears had dried, and there was no smile on her face. She had become like a stone statue, within which there was only emptiness and pain. Upon arriving in New Jersey, the flicker of hope that had ignited in Elizabeth's heart quickly extinguished. David and Sarah's modern apartment was a vast, towering glass edifice where every corner bore the touch of modernity. But for Elizabeth, a small, dark room was allotted. Sunlight barely entered that room, and there was no opportunity to see the outside world through the window. Besides an old bed, a small table, and a chair, there was nothing else in the room. Elizabeth's favorite books, her old photographs, no trace of her memories were there. She felt as if she had come to an unfamiliar world, where she had no existence, no identity. She felt as if she was trapped in a living tomb. For the first few days, David and Sarah pretended to treat her well. They talked about taking her to a doctor, but that doctor was an acquaintance of theirs, who, at David's behest, only gave Elizabeth sleeping pills. It was easier for them if Elizabeth was asleep. When Elizabeth was awake, she would see David and Sarah living their luxurious lives, and she was nothing but a burden to them. Slowly, their true colors began to show. She was not given proper food. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all were very small in quantity and tasteless. Elizabeth remained hungry, but she dared not protest. Her body was weakening, and her spirit was breaking. She felt as if every cell in her body was rebelling, but her voice was silent. She would think to herself, "Did I deserve this fate? Did I not do enough for my son? All my life I only wanted their good, and today they have left me in this dark room. Am I worthless?" Her pension money was regularly stolen. At the beginning of each month, when the pension money was deposited into her account, David would withdraw it. With that money, David and Sarah would eat at their favorite restaurants, buy new clothes, and expensive gadgets. Elizabeth knew her money was being stolen, but she was helpless. She had no phone, no contact with the outside world. She was trapped in an invisible prison, where she had no rights, no freedom. The most painful thing was the loneliness. Elizabeth had no one to talk to. David and Sarah would be out all day, and when they returned at night, they would retreat into their own rooms. They completely ignored Elizabeth. They had no interest in knowing if she needed anything or how she was doing. Elizabeth would sit alone for hours, thinking about her old days and shedding tears. Her beloved Brooklyn home, her neighbor Martha, her old friends, everything seemed to have moved far away from her. She had become like a living corpse with no dreams, no hope. She would say to herself, "Martha, where are you? Have you forgotten me? I know you will come looking for me, but how long will it take? Will I still be alive then?" One day, Elizabeth bravely told David that she wanted to return to her Brooklyn home. David angrily said, "Mom, have you gone crazy? It's not safe for you to be alone in Brooklyn. Besides, we've sold your house." It was as if the sky had fallen on Elizabeth. Her beloved home, her last refuge, had been taken from her. She cried inconsolably, but David felt no pity. Sarah came and said, "Mom, this is your home now. You'll stay here." Elizabeth realized she was completely helpless. She had no path, no way out. She felt as if her last ray of hope had extinguished. Day after day, night after night, Elizabeth remained trapped in that small, dark room. Her body grew weaker, and her mind sank deeper into despair. She often dreamed of her Brooklyn home, her dear Martha, her old friends. But when she woke up, she would find herself in that dark room, where there was no light, no hope. Her silent cries would get lost behind those dilapidated walls. No one could hear them. She felt as if she was waiting for death, because life no longer held any meaning for her. Her tears had dried, and there was no smile on her face. She had become like a stone statue, within which there was only emptiness and pain. Every breath was a sigh, and every day was an endless night. In Brooklyn, Elizabeth's absence had caused deep concern in Martha's mind. Elizabeth was her only true friend, with whom she shared daily joys and sorrows, from morning coffee to evening walks in the park. Martha knew that Elizabeth was not the kind of person to leave suddenly without informing anyone. Every morning, she would knock on Elizabeth's door, inquiring about her well-being, but now that door was silent. An unknown fear began to take root in her heart. Martha had called David several times, but each time David had evaded her with various excuses. Sometimes he would say, "Mom is sleeping now, she needs rest," or sometimes, "Mom is a bit busy, she will call later, Martha." There was an abnormality in David's voice that did not escape Martha's keen observation. His words sounded somewhat mechanical, devoid of emotion. Martha's suspicion grew stronger. She knew that even if Elizabeth was ill, David would not leave her alone like this, nor would he prevent her from talking to anyone. This was unusual. Martha did not give up. She found Elizabeth's old diary, which Elizabeth kept in a hidden drawer in her living room. In that diary, Elizabeth used to write down small events of her life, her feelings, her dreams, her fears. The diary contained details of David and Sarah's greed for property and how they pressured Elizabeth to sell the house. Elizabeth had written, "My son and daughter-in-law want to sell my house. They don't want my good, they only want my money. I don't know what will happen to me." Martha realized that Elizabeth might be in danger. Elizabeth's frightened face, her helpless gaze, flashed before her eyes. Without delay, Martha contacted a local social worker, Mrs. Jenkins. Mrs. Jenkins was an experienced and compassionate woman who worked on cases of elder neglect and abuse. Her office was in a small alley in Brooklyn, where countless people came daily with their sorrows and troubles. Martha explained Elizabeth's situation to Mrs. Jenkins, sharing her suspicions and the contents of the diary. She said, "Mrs. Jenkins, my friend Elizabeth Smith is missing. Her son David and daughter-in-law Sarah have taken her to New Jersey, but I don't trust them. I feel they have held Elizabeth captive." Mrs. Jenkins listened attentively to Martha, her eyes filled with deep sympathy. Mrs. Jenkins took Martha's complaint seriously. She knew that elder neglect and financial fraud were serious problems in the United States. She obtained David's New Jersey address from Martha and contacted the local police. The police were initially hesitant because it was a family matter and they did not want to intervene directly. But Mrs. Jenkins's determination and the information provided by Martha, especially the pages from Elizabeth's diary, compelled them to start an investigation. She convinced the police officers that this was not just a family dispute. It was a serious case of elder neglect and abuse. One day, Mrs. Jenkins was talking to a police officer. Mrs. Jenkins said firmly, "Officer, I can assure you that Elizabeth Smith is in danger. Her diary and her neighbor's testimony are strong enough. We should take action immediately." The police officer replied, "Mrs. Jenkins, we understand your concern. But before intervening in family matters, we need more specific evidence." Mrs. Jenkins said firmly, "Specific evidence? An octogenarian is missing, her son and daughter-in-law are trying to seize her property, and you're talking about specific evidence? Her life could be in danger. If we delay, it will be too late. The police officer was influenced by Mrs. Jenkins's words. He spoke to his superiors and, with court permission, decided to raid David's apartment. Police and Mrs. Jenkins went to David's New Jersey apartment. David and Sarah initially refused to let them enter their home. They made various excuses, saying that Elizabeth was ill and resting, and that it was not right to interfere in their private lives. David said, "Who are you? Why have you come to our house?" "My mother is ill. She is resting." Sarah echoed him, "You cannot interfere in our private lives." But Mrs. Jenkins and the police officers paid no heed to their words. They showed the court order and forced their way into the house. Upon entering the apartment, they were stunned. In a small, dark room in a corner of the large apartment, Elizabeth was found. She was weak, hungry, and mentally distraught. Her eyes were filled with fear and despair, but upon seeing Martha, a glimmer of hope lit up in her eyes. Elizabeth faintly called Martha's name. Martha embraced Elizabeth, and tears welled up in her eyes. Elizabeth's body was skeletal, her clothes dirty, and her hair disheveled. She had become a shadow of her former self. Martha, with a choked voice, said, "Elizabeth, are you all right? I knew you were in trouble." Elizabeth replied weakly, "Martha, you came. I knew you would come." Police officers arrested David and Sarah. They were charged with elder neglect, financial fraud, and unlawful confinement. David and Sarah were stunned. They had nothing to say. Their dreams of a luxurious lifestyle shattered in an instant. Elizabeth was immediately admitted to the hospital. Doctors reported that she was suffering from malnutrition and emotional trauma. It would take a long time for her to recover. But there was a new ray of light in her eyes, a new glimmer of hope. She knew that the dark chapter of her life had ended, and a new dawn awaited her. After being discharged from the hospital, Elizabeth was transferred to a local senior care home. It was located in a quiet area of New Jersey, with green lawns and flower gardens. The care home was clean and equipped with modern facilities. Here, she received the necessary care and love that she had long been deprived of. The nurses were sympathetic to her, and the doctors regularly inquired about her health. Elizabeth's health slowly began to recover. Her weak body regained strength, and a smile began to return to her face. For the first few days, Elizabeth remained silent, with a kind of emptiness in her eyes. She seemed unable to escape the memory of that dark room. But Martha's regular presence brought a new ray of hope into her life. Martha would come from Brooklyn to New Jersey every day, just to visit Elizabeth. She would bring her old books, talk to her, and inspire her to live anew. Martha's presence brought a sigh of relief into Elizabeth's life. One day, Elizabeth and Martha were sitting on a bench in the garden. Elizabeth had a book in her hand, and Martha was smiling at her. Martha said, "Elizabeth, I'm so glad to see you. You're much better now." Elizabeth smiled gently and replied, "Yes, Martha. Because of you, I've learned to live again. I don't know what would have happened to me if you weren't there." Martha held Elizabeth's hand and said, "You're my friend, Elizabeth. It's the least I can do for a friend." Elizabeth would talk to Martha about her Brooklyn home, her old friends, and reminisce about her lost days. Martha would listen attentively and make Elizabeth understand that her life was not over yet, that there was still an opportunity to start anew. Martha's words instilled new strength in Elizabeth. Elizabeth also made friends with other residents of the care home. They would talk, play cards, and walk in the garden together. Elizabeth regained her lost self-confidence. She realized that life is not just about clinging to the past. Life is about starting anew, building new relationships. She began volunteering at the care home's library, organizing old books, and her heart would fill with joy at the smell of new books. David and Sarah's trial concluded. David was sentenced to 10 years in prison for elder neglect and financial fraud. Sarah also received a 5-year prison sentence for her crimes. Their dreams of a luxurious lifestyle shattered. Their son James was sent to his grandmother, who began raising him with love and care. Elizabeth created a trust fund for James to ensure his future. She wanted James not to suffer for his parents' mistakes. She became an active member of that charity organization and shared her own experiences with others so that they could be aware.